director. So I was sworn in April 14th last year.
So do you get it easier to get an elite insurance?
No, not at all. Not at all.
They hit you during the kiddish, huh?
They did during the appeal. They're like, well, you got a new job, because I was a teacher before. You know, teacher salary.
Yeah.
And now like I'm like, no, councilman.
What are you going to do without you?
Oh, Lincoln.
For our press in the back, you need to do an audio check. Testing 1 2, testing 1 2. All right, everybody else okay? Gentlemen, if you can, folks, if you can please stand to the side. You need to do a color balance or anything like that. All right. I'm wearing white. Does it help? Okay. All right, you got it.
Man who knows how to improvise.
Do what you got to do.
Yeah. So this is I didn't see the report yet.
Me too, but I know what's going on.
Is that her?
I'm
They're
on
great.
social media, I see what's going on for a long time.
We don't clap anymore?
Very nice to meet you. I understand you know all about clergy from your family.
Well, I've got a lot of reference and ministers.
Good training.
Very good training, I think so too.
It's a blessing. How are you? Is everybody family as well?
Everybody's well. Thank you so much.
I know you're a wanted woman everywhere in your zip code, so we're very grateful that you took the time out.
Thank you so
For
much.
it is very important globally because New York still counts.
Yeah.
It's number one.
Well, we absolutely love this do this morning, and it's definitely worth listening to.
We appreciate it.
Everything is going well. Thank you. Okay.
I didn't do anything.
So we are going to.
Good morning, Madam
Good
Speaker.
morning,
Nice to
colleagues.
see you. What's going
Good
on?
to see you this morning.
How are you?
Thank you for being here. I'm well.
Thank you for
Good to
doing
see
this.
you.
We really appreciate your leadership.
Absolutely, absolutely. As good morning.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Great to see you all. Come on. Hello, hello, hello.
Yeah, no, I'm coming over to the Jewish boys.
I was gonna say. Stop pushing. I was gonna say a little religion.
This is
pizza.
This is
That we separate the men and women. If you're very religious, you separate the men and women. So we were just no.
But as a city council, we don't separate.
That's right. We're egalitarian.
Let's say we are one.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, sure.
All right, take it off for your photo, right?
No, meaning like.
Okay, everyone. Yeah, fix this, John. We good?
Oh, sorry.
Let's take one more, let's just stand in the chair.
Next to Aaron.
I know, right?
Oh, nice save.
Good catch.
It's polygraph athletic skills.
I think while everyone's here, perhaps I can give you a copy of the report.
Lovely.
Once upon a time, the reports were like these huge discs and all that. And they tell me
It's amazing.
that everything we're going to be hearing this morning is all in Pakistan. And you're the first elected official anywhere to receive it.
That's awesome.
Great.
You can bear with us for another minute, just let video get a shot, guys, still, if you don't mind.
So while I'll probably mention it later, the main reason to come here today is that with your help in the city council, we're training thousands of kids in New York City schools about how to deal with online hate and bullying. So we're in the right place with the right people.
Absolutely. This is great. This is great. Okay. Are we ready? Ready to start? All right. Good morning. And thank you all so much for joining us on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, to unveil the 27th Annual Digital Terrorism Report. And here it is. I'm so glad that this council will be the very first in the country to receive this report. I want to extend my warmest appreciation to Rabbi Cooper. Thank you so much, Rabbi. Michael Cohen, Rick Eaton, and the entire team at the Simon Wiesenthal Center for putting this together, and for all the hard work that you do every day to combat hate, bigotry, and misinformation. We are joined this morning by my colleagues in the council who lead caucuses that represent communities deeply impacted by hate in its various forms, and the chair of our technology committee. I want to acknowledge council members Eric Dinowitz, chair of the Jewish Caucus, Linda Lee, vice chair of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, Natasha Williams, treasurer of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, and chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee, and Councilmember Jennifer Gutierrez, our Technology Committee Chair. We also have Councilmember Lincoln Ressler, Councilmember Ari Kagan, and Councilmember Mercedes Narcisse joining us as well. In the presence of our diverse caucuses who stand in solidarity today is very, very important on this issue. And I know our LGBTQ caucus wanted to be here to share its support with us today as well. Since the start of the pandemic, communities across the United States have experienced a terrifying rise in hate violence and attacks, and New York is no exception. The Anti-Defamation League recorded more than 416 anti-Semitic incidents in New York last year alone. Our Jewish communities are still the most targeted victims of hate violence. But it's not just our Jewish communities who are experiencing this uptick. We've seen it. We've seen that our Asian American, LGBTQ, and Muslim communities have been subjected to this violence also. In my very own district in Southeast Queens, our Sikh community has been targeted by hate also. This violence is unacceptable, and we must always root out hate wherever and whenever it rears its ugly head. What we see with the Digital Terrorism Report released today is that hate speech and violence live online and through digital platforms that reach our children. Through social media and gaming platforms, agents of hate are spreading misinformation, dangerous conspiracy theories, and racist, anti-Semitic, and xenophobic language that can influence all users. We expect that social media platforms and gaming companies can and must do a better job of rooting out messages of hate, preventing them from reaching people who are susceptible, including our most vulnerable, our children. We know that when environments of hate are fostered, they can manifest into violence. We have to get to the root of the problem, preventing hate from growing and turning into violence. One way that we can do that is by addressing online spaces that foment hate and should be more responsible. The other is by bringing our communities together to confront hate and foster unity, understanding, and respect that doesn't allow for hate to have space to grow at all. Here in New York City, the Council has long championed measures that are aimed at preventing and responding to hate crimes. Our Cure Hate initiative supports swift, individualized responses to victims of hate crimes by healing affected communities. The Council has allocated $1 million for the Hate Crimes Initiative, which supports community-based groups working to prevent and respond to hate crimes across the city. And a portion of the $4 million AAPI Community Support Initiative funds anti-bias and hate crime efforts that are needed right now, but we are not done yet. In the upcoming city budget, the Council has called on the administration to commit $5 million to support community organizations in their hate crime prevention and response work, as well as the work of the Mayor's Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. As a city, we are committed to rooting out hate and keeping communities safe from violence. I am proud to know that the Simon Wiesenthal Center is a partner in this effort, not just here in New York, but across the entire country. I am grateful for your continued focus and efforts in this important work. So once again, thank you, Rabbi Cooper, very, very much. Michael Cohen, Rick Eaton, and all of you here for allowing us to join you in the release of this valuable report. I hope everyone gets a chance to read it and be a part of the call for change. Thank you very much. I believe my colleagues may have words to share as well. Rabbi, we will bring you up first, though.
Dangerous to bring a clergy, but okay. It's your house. Thank you so much. And on behalf of my colleagues, Rick Eaton, one of the most knowledgeable experts on internet and digital terrorism and hate, Michael Cohen, our Eastern Director, our United Nations representative, Eric Greenberg, who's here as well, and who's joined our effort here in New York to, because frankly, I'm a native New Yorker. Right now, New York needs as much help as it can get, and we're honored to also partner with the City Council and to say thank you to Madam Speaker and everyone here, because we are in the New York City schools already working the other end, empowering the young people, because we'll never stop our kids from getting online, we know that, but teaching them the difference between an idea you may not like and something that devolves into hate or something worse. And so this is part of a more holistic approach. Wasn't a business plan. If you just follow what's been going on, we believe very strongly that you have to make a serious effort to be in the schools. Today is Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day. I'd like to invite everyone to just take a few seconds, moment of silence and reflection in memory of the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who were murdered, and including those very brave people who fought back throughout the Holocaust, unfortunately without any support from any world government, to maintain a link to the past and give us inspiration, heroic leaders whose names we know and many that we don't, women and men who stood up and fought. So let us have a moment of collective reflection. Thank you. Our namesake, Simon Wiesenthal, was actually born in what is today Ukraine, in Buchach, outside of what was then Lvov and today is Lviv. And he suffered under the communist occupation. His father was tortured to death in a communist jail. His stepbrother was shot and killed. During the Holocaust, Mr. Wiesenthal was able to have his wife hidden among righteous Gentiles. And unfortunately, the 89 other members of their family perished at the hands of the Nazis. When he was freed by the American soldiers in Mauthausen concentration camp in May 1945, he was too weak to stand. And yet, what gave him the will to go on was to try to make a difference after the war. And you might say he became the unelected, unofficial ambassador of 6 Million Ghosts. And he also dedicated his life to resurrecting the basic concept of justice that motivate our democracy and everyone who's in this room. In 1980, give you an idea how old I am, I accompanied Mr. Wiesenthal when he spoke to universities across the Midwest, and at each stop, always a student asked the same question: Mr. Wiesenthal, could it happen again? And here's what he answered over, 40 years ago. He said, when a society has a crisis, plus hate, plus technology, anything is possible. Mr. Wiesenthal went on to say that if the technology that the Nazis had been available in 1492, no Jew would have survived in Spain, no Catholic would have survived in England, no Protestant would have survived in France. Now, those of us, here we are in 2022, and you say technology, Nazis, that's like baby stuff. Yeah, they had hate books, and they had the newsreels, and they were very effective. It was all cutting edge back then in the 1930s and the 1940s. So if you go back to what he was trying to teach us and warn us about, where we're at today with communication, where we're at today with social media platforms that bypass the good news and the bad news, all national borders and basically all laws, where we know we're in crisis, we know that hate is real, and we know that if we don't come together with all our diversity and disagreements on this basic issue, we're going to continue to be in free fall. And that's a lesson that we were lucky enough to learn directly from Mr. Wiesenthal, and we carry that out in his honor and in his memory. A few points about the study. My colleague Rick Eaton is going to do a quick PowerPoint, and anyone who wants to get the total PowerPoint, the complete, just speak to us afterwards. You can just email it or send us a message. But I can just show you that middle tab over here, where you can see, if you look closely, you can see at the bottom right someone who's getting ready for the gay pride parade, arming up and getting ready to go out and do violence. You see the abuse of symbols of the Holocaust, right? Vaccinated, the whole important debate about how much we should get vaccinated, taken down a black hole by extremists who try to affix or have affixed the imagery and the message of the Holocaust onto an important social debate. In the upper left-hand corner, especially worrisome, is the celebration of mass murderers. So whether it was the one in New Zealand who murdered 51 Muslims at prayer in 2 mosques, or the shooter at the Tree of Life synagogue, and on, they're presented as angels in a movement. They're the heroes that they're trying to present. And then just very quickly, if you take a look, you can see 2 games. Of course, it was no games, just a few steps from here. You see an American Airlines plane about to go into one of the Twin Towers. That's a game that kids are exposed to in the gaming world, because the extremists have found a whole new arena they can play with. And down at the bottom, you can see the Auschwitz Arbeit macht frei, designed to attract kids into the picture. I want to make just one last point. We have time later. I know that our elected officials have a very busy schedule. I want to go to the digital report card. For full disclosure, I was educated here in New York, and I never got straight A's any year that I was in. So this is actually a pleasure for me. What we do each year is we grade the social media giants. We all know them by their name. And then there are a few folks here who are experts who will recognize some of the other networking, the memes, the videos. But this represents the overall challenge, and I would say the overall failure of the gatekeepers of social media especially to deal seriously with hate. And what we're looking for is to degrade the marketing capability of the extremist groups and individuals. We tend to see things only in the lens of speech. We all sort of forget that essentially we're generally not looking at debating societies, but at subcultures and groups that get together, individuals that get together to promote a certain worldview, however lurid or phony it might be, in very effective ways. A number of people asked me before we started formally, what's going to happen with Twitter? So Judaism, thank God our rabbis were smart enough to warn us about 500 years ago that since the destruction of our second temple, we no longer have the power of prophecy. So instead of telling everyone what I think Mr. Moss is going to do about Twitter, here's the message that we'd like to send to him. If he can expand the bandwidth of real public, robust public discussion and debate, he's doing what we say in the old country, a big mitzvah. On the other hand, it's not that simple, because unfortunately, as you'll see in this report, there are very many dedicated individuals, well-funded in some cases, high-tech geniuses in other cases, who unfortunately devote their lives to creating the platform to bring the messages of hate, to try to recruit young people, to celebrate murder, and they represent a challenge to each of us, but especially to our children. So without any further ado, I would like, with your permission, Madam Speaker, to ask Rick Eaton to stand by. If there's anyone else who'd like to say a few words,
If we
we're
can
happy.
just have the colleagues come up, and then we'll bring Rick back.
Great.
Okay, thank you so much. We are so enlightened by you, by your report, by your team, and we thank you again. I know that my council member colleagues that are here today do have remarks, and I'd like to first bring up our chair of the Jewish Caucus, Councilmember Eric Dinowitz, who will then extend the invitation to other colleagues to speak if they wish. Councilmember?
Thank you, Speaker. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us at City Hall and for all the work you've done for your report. I truly wish the report didn't have to exist, but it does. You mentioned the grades, and you said your report card. My report card actually looked pretty similar to that. The difference is when those are my grades, that affects me and my family. But when these are the grades of social media platforms, it results in violence. I'm Councilmember Eric Dinowitz. I represent the 11th District in the Bronx, and I'm also chair of the Jewish Caucus. Madam Speaker, I just want to thank you not just for the press conference, but for every stated elevating the issue that anti-Semitism is the #1 hate crime here in the city and calling it out every single time. And to all of my colleagues who are here in your different capacities for advocating for the Jewish community, advocating against hate in all of your different roles. I also want to thank the Wiesenthal Center for the release of their 27th annual digital terrorism report, which raises awareness of hate crimes across social media and digital platforms. The timing of this press conference is incredibly meaningful as it coincides with Yom HaShoah, the day of Holocaust remembrance observed by Jews around the world. My children are descendants of survivors, so this holiday is especially meaningful, and this work is especially meaningful to me, so thank you. Throughout our history, people of the Jewish faith have had to contend with oppressive regimes, forced assimilation, harmful stereotypes, which you see repeated here, genocide, and a multitude of hurdles simply because of our religious beliefs and our heritage. New York City is home to the largest Jewish population outside of the state of Israel, and our right to exist wherever we may live is being threatened at every turn. It's hard to have these conversations without also mentioning Israel. That right to exist and this hurtful language is compounded by harmful rhetoric surrounding our conversations about the state of Israel. Here in New York City and in our politics, we see a disturbing rise in anti-Semitism masked as legitimate criticism of Israel. When the notion that Jews should have a right to self-determination is challenged, when Jews are excluded from political conversations, and when Jews are beaten up in the streets because of policies in Israel, an ocean away, when Jews themselves are compared to Hitler, it stops becoming about legitimate disagreements with Israel, and it is about anti-Semitism. It's also not just those who participate in the rhetoric, but when leaders are silent, it creates a safe space for even more of that anti-Jewish sentiment to flourish, and the result is violence. And again, that's why I want to thank so many of my colleagues for standing together and not being silent in the face of hate. This isn't anecdotal. Just 2 days ago, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, released its 2022 audit on anti-Semitic incidents, and the results are a painful reminder that Jewish people are still being targeted even decades after the Holocaust. According to them, there's an average of 7 incidents per day, with New York having the highest number of incidents in the last year. The numbers show that anti-Jewish crimes, violent crimes, are up 207% since last year. These acts of hate are occurring in our streets, subway stations, college campuses, schools, and institutions, making Jewish people fearful to leave their homes and live with the threat of violence. But when we say violence, it's not just physical violence and physical harm. We are deeply disturbed by stories of physical battery and assault against Jews, but violence can be displayed through words and symbolism. And we see it right there. This has been the story throughout the pandemic, that anti-maskers and anti-vaxxers flagrantly misappropriating the Star of David, trivializing the memory of how Nazis forced Jews to self-identify during the Holocaust. And as outlined by the Wiesenthal Center, our children are exposed to many online gaming platforms that spread hateful and harmful content, including the replicas of Nazi extermination camps, and glorifying it. As a former teacher, The exposure of our children to hate is what hurts the most. And we must fight hate and ignorance with investment in education and investment in our children. Our students must learn in school about discrimination against the Jewish people that exists right here in New York City and the worldwide devastation of the Holocaust. Now, education means everything. We learn about our past not so that we could pass the next unit test, but so that looking forward, we can make a better future. A poll conducted in 1938 showed that fewer than 5% of Americans believed the U.S. should accept more refugees fleeing fascist states abroad, which at the time was largely Jewish populations. It's a chilling historical fact we look back on now, knowing that 3 years later, a systematic genocide of the Jewish people resulted in 6 million murders. Yet today, Americans remain divided about increasing the number of refugees admitted into the country. We share our humanity and history with each other so that we can build a strong community that spreads love, not hate. Our City Council budget response, spearheaded by Speaker Adams, makes meaningful investments to combat hate in all forms, including anti-Jewish hate. The council is calling on the administration to commit $5 million to support community organizations' hate crime prevention and response work, as well as the Mayor's Office for Prevention of Hate Crimes. We're investing in the Cure Hate Initiative and the Hate Crimes Initiative, which support fast and individualized responses to the victims of hate crimes. And it's critical that we bring attention to the other communities that have been terrorized by hate crimes. The council's AAPI Community Support Initiative and our AAPI community has seen drastic increases in anti-Asian hate, especially in the past few years, which is hurtful. And again, when we see hate, we can never be silent. And as a member of the budget negotiating team, I'm committed to fight for more funds to go towards these programs that stop harassment, violence, and discrimination of all of New York City's diverse communities. We need to keep investing time and funds on anti-hate programming and nonprofits that fight discrimination and offer protection to communities most affected by hate crimes. Anti-Semitism doesn't just affect Jewish communities. Acts of hate affect every New Yorker, and we are all victims of this hostile culture. Again, thank you to our speaker, to the Wiesenthal Center for your work, to all of my colleagues, and for everyone who speaks out and does the work to combat hate. Thank you. The next speaker will be co-chair, vice co-chair of the Black, Latino, and Asian Caucus, Councilmember Linda Lee.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you again, Madam Speaker, as well as Rabbi for your work and the Simon Wiesenthal Center for all this important data that has been put out. I'm a little nervous because my 7-year-old loves Roblox, and I see that on the list over there. So
They're trying.
yeah. So that's good to know because half these I don't even know.
Maybe you can explain what the population base of Roblox is.
They're young. Okay, so just real quick, I mean, I'm sure for those that have young kids, you know, but Roblox, my son is 7. He's on it all the time talking to, I don't know who, to be honest. And it's really a way for them to connect online to a lot of other people on the internet, on the web. But as we know, a lot of those folks may be predators that are seeking out how to, you know, take advantage and teach them things that we're not even monitoring. So that is a bit scary. But in any case, this, as others have mentioned, the report is welcome, but it's not surprising. And across New York City, hate crimes against Asians have increased by over 300% last year. And I would actually argue it's more because we all know that it's very underreported. Folks in our communities do not like speaking up and speaking out because they're afraid, whether, a fear of losing their status or other reasons. And so we know that that number is probably on the low side. And social media and online platforms only help that hate speech and spread. And as vice chair, co-vice chair of the BLAC, I know that the strength of New York and America is our diversity, and I'm here to send that message that hate, no matter the target or medium, is unacceptable. And just as a side note, one of the reasons why I personally wanted to join the leadership of the BLAC is because I think it's important as one of the first Korean Americans, along with my colleague Julie Wan, as well as for the first time, we now have 5 Asian Americans on the city council. I think it's important for the Asian community to have that voice and stand up in solidarity and unity, because we saw very clearly post 9/11 how a lot of our Sikh Muslim community members were being targeted, and they were so supportive to our community, as well as the Jewish community supportive after all the hate crimes that we've been experiencing the last couple of years. So I just wanted to say thank you, and that this is not something new that we're seeing. And as mentioned by my other colleagues, we're working to address the hate crimes through the Cure Hate Initiative, which helps provide individualized responses to communities and individuals victimized by hate. And we're also funding the anti-bias hate crime prevention efforts as part of the Council's AAPI Community Support Initiative. And as the Speaker and Councilmember Dinowitz mentioned, we are committing or calling on the administration to commit $5 million to support community organizations' hate crime prevention and response work, as well as the Mayor's Office for the Prevention of Hate Crimes. But as we know, government alone cannot address or handle all of these issues, and we need the private sector to finally take online hate seriously, because no matter how much you fund hate crime prevention efforts on the street, you can't get at the root of the issue without addressing the ideology that motivates it. And we also need groups like the Wiesenthal Center to hold the private sector accountable for the content they allow to proliferate online. And so let's be clear, these statistics are horrifying and worrisome. They can and will lead to someone getting hurt, and online companies are profiting off this content, whether they admit it or not. And so we need to take action now, and I just want to thank all of our colleagues for joining us here today to send that message. Thank you.
Next speaker is going to be Councilwoman Natasha Williams, Chair of the Human and Civil Rights Committee.
Hello, I am honored to be here on the Day of Holocaust Remembrance. I'm proud to join the Asian, LGBTQ, Jewish, and other communities who have been victimized by hate. Everyone here is united by a similar reality, that we are targeted in person and online because of who we are. It doesn't matter if you are LGBTQ, Jewish, Black, Asian, Latino, or any other identity. You deserve to feel safe everywhere, especially online. As the chair of the Civil and Human Rights Committee and executive board member of the Black, Latino, Asian Caucus, I'm here to send the message that each and every community who calls New York home is united with our fellow New Yorkers in opposing hate. We know from our history that there's no solution to hate, and that try as we might, we cannot erase it completely. But we can send a message through our unity that hate is unacceptable, and we won't allow it to take root in our society. That's what today's report is about, calling out hate, and when we see it online, and condemning it so that society takes action to stamp it out completely. I want to thank the Wiesenthal Center for their incredible work on this report and in general. Going forward, we need to work to build bridges between our communities, promote understanding and mutual respect, and lift each other up. I also want to plug in that next week on May 3rd, I will be hosting a joint hearing with the Public Safety Committee on hate crimes and discrimination. I encourage everyone to sign up and testify. I'll end with this quote. If you have come to help me, you are wasting your time. If you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Which is beautiful words by activist Leela Watson. Ultimately, we are all bound by anti-hate, and it is the unity that will uplift us to overcome this. I look forward to working with everyone to root out hate. Thank you.
Now, Councilwoman Gutierrez, Chair of the Technology Committee.
Thank you. I'll be fast. Good morning, or whatever is left of the morning. My name is Jennifer Gutierrez. I'm the chair of the Council's Technology Committee, as also vice chair of the Progressive Caucus. I represent, and I'm privileged to represent, Ridgewood, Bushwick, and Williamsburg in Brooklyn. I am proud to say that I'm not someone that comes from a tech background. I am an organizer, and what that means is that I'm constantly seeking out voices to uplift, to protect, to empower, whether it's policy or on-the-ground issues that directly affect our communities, or in this case, technology. As the chair of the Technology Committee, my focus is on increasing equity and access for communities that have been historically excluded from tech, from opportunities, for employment to students having necessary equipment to be able to learn remotely, and having the basic needs like fiber optic cable and internet in our neighborhoods. The growing use of technology to spread hate and misinformation is deeply concerning to me and indicates the movement of our tools is going in the wrong direction. We know the power of social media to empower communities to take action in doing what's right. We also sadly know how impactful social media can be in spreading lies, hate content, and building fear against marginalized communities. Today on Yom HaShoah? All right, muy bien. Holocaust Remembrance Day. I am mindful of increasing levels of hate directed at the Jewish community, both online and in person. New York State now has the unfortunate distinction in leading the country in anti-Semitic acts with an all-time high since incidents were first tracked. And like I mentioned, I represent Williamsburg. I share that with my colleague Lincoln Ressler, and so obviously this is something that concerns me and I'm directly impacted by. I stand with the Jewish community today and every day to say unequivocally that these attacks are unacceptable. Each incident only underscores how the Jewish community stands strong in the face of hatred. The xenophobia, racism, and anti-Semitism that has infiltrated our social media platforms and then manifest as attacks on real people and communities is unacceptable. Full stop. There is no place for hate in the most richly diverse and immigrant-built city in the world. I'm grateful to the Simon Wiesenthal Center in partnership with the Speaker for their work to hold the entities accountable for allowing hate to go unchecked. Today, I'm introducing my first legislation as a council member, including a bill that will create guaranteed internet access for public school students, empowering youth and the next generation through opportunities for learning and responsible stewardship of powerful online tools is our best bet to rooting out hate and building a more just and equitable New York City. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last elected official, a member of the Jewish Caucus, Councilmember Kagan.
Good afternoon. My name is Ari Kagan. I'm New York City Council member from beautiful neighborhoods of Southern Brooklyn, Coney Island, Seagate, Gravesend, Bensonhurst, Bass Beach. And many of my constituents are Holocaust survivors. I am a grandson of a victim of Minsk ghetto. My grandmother, paternal grandmother, was killed on March 2nd, 1942 by Nazis together. And she was killed together with her two children. My father was the only survivor. And that's why I even exist in this world, because my father was a survivor. I would say that we always say never again. For 10 years, I was a vice president of Holocaust Memorial Committee in Southern Brooklyn. And every time we say never again, and I'm a Jewish refugee from the former Soviet Union, I came to America in the first place because I wanted to avoid anti-Semitism. Never in my wildest imagination I would see what's going on in New York City, what's going on in Brooklyn. Like in the last 2 years, like, did we see this movie again? Words matter. Words matter. Hitler started with words. Initially, nobody believed him, said, no, it cannot be the truth, Final solution, he cannot kill all the Jews, it's impossible, like what he's talking about, forget about him, he's crazy. But today's report proves that words are really, really, really important. Words on social media, words by our elected officials, words by our clergy, and I admire, I praise Simon Wiesenthal Center for your incredible work. Fighting anti-Semitism and all kinds of hate. Of course, huge thanks to our colleagues in New York City Council, Eric Dinovich, Chair of Jewish Caucus, of course, Madam Speaker Adams, and every one of you and every one of my colleagues. Every time we face hate, we have to speak up. But sometimes if you just spend time on internet fighting anti-Semitism, fighting hate, you can spend the entire day on social media just like, what are you talking about? Why are you blasting congressmen for going to Israel? Like, is it a crime to go to Israel at this point? Not even policy disagreement. Picture of my favorite congressman, Hakeem Jeffries, near Western Wall, and a lot of comments like, what the hell are you doing there? This is like terrible Nazi state. And words have consequences. Words have consequences. It leads to violence. So that's why it's so important today that we learn about this report. How dangerous is it, to spread hate over social media? And we need to stand together, especially today's Yom HaShoah. So again, never again. Today, never again, forever. And we need to speak up. Thank you so much for everyone who is not silent.
Thank you. I'm going to call up Brick Eaton in a second, but I You know, here in New York City and everywhere, we're very comfortable with our own groups, with our own ethnic, religious groups. So I just want to say again, thank you to all of my colleagues who are not Jewish, who are standing together in solidarity to fight anti-Semitism. And now Rick Eaton's going to present the digital terrorism hate report. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. I just want to say thank you to the Speaker Adams and the rest of the council people who came today to endorse our report. I wanted to mention one posting up on the middle poster here that was not mentioned, and that is one targeting Asians. And it's a very simple Twitter post that says, "There are too many Asians. Someone needs to cull the herd." We looked, and we have a slide on here, we looked at just recent postings in the last couple of days targeting Asians, and there are many of them out there. So that is on the PowerPoint, and we can make that available to you. As you see, the platforms that we're most concerned about, most of you you're all familiar with the subway shooter, Frank James. What you might not be familiar with is the fact that he had nearly 4,000 followers on YouTube and over 180,000 views of his videos, which were pretty much anti-everyone, misogynistic, racist, anti-Semitic, etc. 180,000 views. You don't. That takes a little bit of time to get those kind of numbers, and for some reason, apparently, they were never flagged by anyone. These are flyers that have been distributed around different communities, literally around the country, blaming Jews for COVID, for the situation in Ukraine, and the like. But those are hard copy flyers. We're also finding the same thing on digitally that's spread around a little fancier format, but using the same thing. As I mentioned, also the fact that they're now blaming Jews for the situation in Ukraine, same type of flyers. We wanted to talk a little bit about disinformation and fake news, because with the Ukraine situation, there's been a great deal of fake news on. And one of the sites that we're looking at, this was the horrific attack on the maternity hospital in Ukraine, and almost immediately, the Russians came back and said this is all fake news. That was actually committed by Nazis in the Ukrainian army and the like. And they even set up a site called waronfakes.com. This is actually a Russian disinformation site that they've set up to counter any accusations of war crimes in various communities, in Mariupol and Bucha and some of the other communities in Ukraine. But this was only set up literally a few weeks ago by, and they don't even hide it. It's on a Russian server set up by Russians. Oliver Stone retweeted, the director retweeted from waronfakes.com. And one of the other sites that we deal with a lot, there's a lot of misinformation, is a site called CloudHub. And you'll see this posting here, which is from Best News Here, trying to sell themselves as they're the best place to get news. All fake news.
Take questions in the rotunda.
Okay. A lot of information, obviously, on COVID vaccines. This is a woman who's actually an osteopath who has been preaching against vaccines, but she veered straight into anti-Semitism recently, reposting an anti-Semitic post. This is reactions to Justice, the new Judge Jackson, who will soon to be a justice on the Supreme Court. Extremely racist postings claiming that she allows people to be pedophiles and doesn't give out sentences when all of her sentences were within the sentencing guidelines, and just blatantly racist posts as well. These are postings about the synagogue shooting in Texas about a month ago. First, blaming the Muslim that committed the acts because he didn't kill enough Jews. And then there was another posting which says it's all a false flag because Jews wouldn't be live streaming from a synagogue on a Saturday. And as was mentioned, Roblox is a game using robots for kids. You have this one at the gates of Auschwitz. This is actually a dance. And this one, a game where your job is to fly planes into the Twin Towers. A lot of things using figures from the Holocaust, such as this, and there's a program where you can actually make people sing. And a lot of anti-Asian, as I mentioned. These are just some of the more recent ones in the last couple of days. TikTok, one of our worst places, a range of hate, anti-Semitism, anti-LGBTQ, promoting terrorism recipes, and so forth. And then Telegram, which is our one-stop shop for hate, is anti-everyone. Telegram is actually the worst site online. Celebrations of April 20th, Hitler's birthday, which was just last week. Celebrations of, skip that, celebrations of the Christchurch anniversary 3 years ago, almost to the day. And it just goes on where there's more and more postings every single day to the point where it makes it hard. Comparing Dr. Fauci to an actual picture of Dr. Joseph Mengele, photoshopping it, a picture that was taken at Auschwitz concentration camp. And you see some of those on the poster, blaming Jews for 9/11. Talk about Holocaust denial on Clubhouse, anti-LGBTQ, as we've seen a couple of them like this. So all of these are available on the PowerPoint, which we're happy to send you a link to download, and you can get better visuals.
We understand that the room is needed for another event. We'll be in the rotunda. If you have any questions or you'd like to spend one-on-one for a few moments, we'll be available. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it very much. And let's hear good news from each other.
Thank you all.
Well done.